Hey, Marcus House with you here, and Starship roars back into action with a pre-launch static fire this week. But the most intriguing development, SpaceX going for a hot staging system of the Starship in the next flights, diving deep into all that. With all that great news, some less great news with a host of mishaps and delays coming from many directions. We then have CHAPEA's year-long analog mission to Mars kicking off this week, which might turn out to be the most exciting mission not to leave the Earth. And then we've got a bunch more, so let's just jump right into it.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
With so much to cover today, let's continue where we left off last week with the colossal orbital launch mount work going on. The rebar for the pile cap was looking amazing a week ago, and it didn't seem like there was much left to do before they would begin pouring the first parts of that concrete. Indeed, on Sunday evening, multiple concrete pumps rolled in, two set up right next to the rebar pit, with a third on standby just in case of any issues. Before we knew it, a near constant stream of concrete deliveries came screaming through. How many? Well, over 130, all coming in about 5 minutes apart. They were not messing around here, and obviously all this concrete is going to take quite some time to fully cure. It's going to take well over a month before it's fully up to strength. However, after just a few days, they can begin doing basic work on top. Now, Elon did indicate that this system has been designed to be very overkill, so SpaceX are confident that all these modifications are going to hold up well. At this stage, there is still a lot of exposed rebar above, so expect the next pouring to come soon. If we look very carefully at this image, you can see that rebar is poking out just above the ground level. The self-propelled modular transporters, or SPMTs, are very flexible though, so they should be well equipped to compensate for any new incline. Now, to ensure that the next layer of concrete will stay where it needs to be, SpaceX has been busy lifting multiple concrete forms in. One little thing that we are unsure about is whether they will install the deluge system, at least partially, before pouring that next lot of concrete, so awaiting a few more hints on that. A super awesome insight on the steel plate system though came to light this week. You may recall a few weeks ago we were peering into this tent and could tell that a plate section was in there, but after opening up the side of the tent to move those out, we had an unrestricted view. The result? Much more epic than we had anticipated. This gigantic section looks like a major segment of what will eventually be placed right below the launch mount, all in one piece. To the left and right, you can very clearly see two cutouts where the existing diverters on the legs will be. The question that I saw a few people asking is how would SpaceX lift that huge plate underneath the launch mount? Well, vertically we suspect. Check out this huge transport stand. The installation inside the orbital launch mount will be very interesting to watch too, because this plate is far too big to be lifted in horizontally between two of the legs. It's worth noting that this colossal plate has just been rolled out on two SPMTs, and that is now sitting at the launch site, all streamed live here by NASA Spaceflight. So over at the tank farm, remember when we talked about the two footings here potentially for another methane tank? Well, yes, this was first spotted by Anthony Gomez in Brownsville, arriving at the launch site this week. The SpaceX crane was quickly hooked up, and there we go. Joining its brethren, the new methane tank will increase the total capacity of the tank farm. Moving on to the suborbital side of the launch site, Ship 25 had an exciting week. It is still here, sitting on suborbital pad B, but after this thrilling event, Tuesday was a day of action. Once the roads closed, the ship gave us a wave for good luck, and soon the tank farm was in action. NASA Spaceflight had already announced that a static fire notice had gone out at this point, so it was clear what they were about to attempt. Propellant load had begun, followed by the engine chill starting up. Just like the orbital launch mount with the booster, the suborbital pads have also been configured to guide the constant stream of oxygen far enough away from the ship skirt to avoid a pesky, unintended high energy event. That is good to see, and there we go, Ship 25's very first static fire. So how many engines was that? Well, we didn't have to wait long to find out, because SpaceX released this simply awesome drone shot footage, informing us at the same time that indeed it was all 6 engines firing. What I really love about this shot is that if you slow it down, you can really see the staggered ignition. I can only assume that we first see the 3 sea-level gimbaling engines firing up, followed shortly by the 3 vacuum engines. That wasn't all the goodies that SpaceX shared either. Multiple great pictures followed, and this one here may be my favourite static fire shot to date. Which one was yours? As is typical for a successful test, the depress vent came a couple of minutes later, so the vehicle safing operations were underway. I just think it's been amazing to see the engine testing campaign for Ship 25 going so smoothly. It looks like just the 1 spin prime and the 1 static fire to fully certify it ahead of its flight. In comparison, Ship 24 had multiple spin primes. Over at the build site, things were looking very busy too, as always. Starting off right as last week's video was being released, Booster 11 in the Mega Bay. There it was being lifted inside with the help of both bridge cranes being placed on its transport stand. Destination, the Rocket Garden, right next to its older sibling, Booster 10. During the rollout, one of the Lab Padre cameras was able to take these awesome shots. Just look at all that detail there. Construction of the second Mega Bay is still ripping along, with the 3rd level only missing 1 corner at the time of rendering this video. It had been moved over ready to be stacked though, so onto the 4th level very soon. Okay, so I think it's fair to say that our main Starship story this week is around hot staging. No, not that hot staging, this hot staging. Why are we talking about this? Well, you've probably seen a bunch of nice renders like this floating around, and all of this is due to the speculation around Elon Musk's Twitter space chat with Ashley Vance. Elon dropped the bombshell that the Starship separation from the booster would in future be done by having the booster first throttled right down to about minimum thrust, with just its 3 center engines staying lit at about 50% thrust. The Starship's engines on top there would then ignite with the booster still attached and firing. Due to the higher thrust to weight ratio of the ship, it would then cleanly separate, leaving the booster to flip around and boost back. To do this obviously needs modifications to protect the top of the booster, which I'll get to shortly, but why do this instead of just cutting the engines and separating like was originally intended? After all, they've been doing this perfectly fine with Falcon 9 all this time. Elon's claim in the Twitter space is that this huge change to the flight profile could actually increase the payload margin to orbit by up to 10%. If that is true, that is huge. I will say though that 10% does seem like a lot, doesn't it? So how could this be? Well, as outlined in the old flight plan from the SpaceX website, the Starship would have spent about 8 seconds or so without any thrust after the booster engine shutdown. The news is actually worse for the booster, which would have needed to wait almost 20 seconds to restart its engines for the boost back burn. It's quite a lengthy time to not be under thrust. Now, hot staging has been used by a number of rockets in the past, but we typically see this from the Russian vehicles such as the Proton and the Soyuz. The obvious rocket to compare this to is the N1, shown in this great animation by Haze Grey Art. Before the Starship test flight, this was previously the most powerful rocket to ever launch. So what are the benefits of hot staging? Because of the continuous thrust output, the propellant remains settled, making the process of lighting the next stage simpler and far more reliable. As Musk said in the interview, never stop thrusting. Hot staging maximises efficiency and propellant utilisation, and it sheds the weight of the booster while simultaneously igniting the Starship engines. How many engines though? Well, that we don't yet know, but presumably it's going to light the sea-level gimbaling engines first, followed by the vacuum engines as soon as possible after that. Talk about a seamless transition. Hey, look, it takes a lot of time and effort to come up with those incredible gags, so make sure you're subscribed and all that stuff, yeah? Now you might be saying to yourself, this hot staging thing is going to obliterate the top of that booster, isn't it? Well, actually, this might be the perfect time to witness the old Titan II hot stage footage from NASA's archives. Yeah, if SpaceX wants to reuse that booster, they are going to need to make it a lot more robust than that. I will say, credit where credit is due, because TDSN and the Ring Watchers were the first betting on this hot staging option becoming a reality from about a month ago. I'd seen this at the time, but didn't really take it seriously because it seemed very unlikely that SpaceX would go this way with Starship, given their existing success with Falcon 9 stage separation systems. A lot of early speculation seemed to imply that this archway ring may be used as a new extension for the booster, which would allow the exhaust gases from the ship ship to be expelled out from the cutouts. The thought currently is that this part is scrapped now, so it may have just been a rough prototype, or perhaps we'll see more of these appear soon. We then had another sturdy ring segment appear with a dome, which looked like a good candidate for a new reinforcement section, as snapped here by RGV. We had thought that this may be related to the hot staging extension for the booster. However, this week a payload bay section was moved into the high bay along with that sturdy ring section, so it might be safer to assume that this is actually going to become a future test article, perhaps one that can verify the design of the Starlink payload door so that it will hold up during descent. Regardless, this means an increase in the booster height, and that is also most likely why we've been seeing a lot of work on the ship quick disconnect arm just recently. Of course, it's going to be intriguing to see how exactly they plan to integrate new rings with the current booster itself. That's because SpaceX are planning to modify the existing Booster 9 and Ship 25 for this hot staging system. With this speculative modification to the booster, we hope that the top of it can withstand the huge forces from a ship firing off right above it. So just to finish off with another example of hot staging, we had a Soyuz launch this week. One curious thing about this launch is that they actually had paid customers from Malaysia and the UAE. Also on board were payloads from the UK and Luxembourg, I believe. I think that this is the first time that I've seen them launch foreign satellites since all the sanctions were introduced. I'm not sure if this is a pattern we'll continue to see or not, but along with a bunch of mini CubeSats, the primary payload was a Russian weather satellite. This story fits quite well with today's story of hot staging because the Soyuz also does this. Jared Owen does a great job of explaining the entire rocket and launch processes in his video that is linked in the description. These three orange panels essentially are jettisoned after separation, which is what we see here in the not so clear live stream from the other day. Now, shout out to Woody Hoberg on the International Space Station as one of the Crew 6 team. He has been sharing some terrific stuff on Twitter, so make sure you are following that Astro Woody account. In fact, I was thrilled this week to have a quick chat with him over Twitter direct message just to thank him for sharing some of these details. In particular, this video here demonstrates how the astronauts can modify their suit size just a little in various areas of the suit, such as the boots and the waist, something I must admit I didn't realise was a thing. Secondly, this is the DIDB, or the disposable in-suit drink bag. That goes right into the suit during spacewalks and holds around 1 litre of water, but this demonstration shows how they remove bubbles from the bag in microgravity. Yeah, give it a spin and then gently suck the air out from the top. The Crew 6 team, of course, are continuing their important work and then will return around September this year. A big victory for Virgin Galactic on Thursday with the huge success of their very first commercial mission. The 4 adventurous passengers on board all released with the ship and were rocketed into suborbital space to run some quick experiments while floating weightlessly at an awe-inspiring apogee of around 85 kilometers or 53 miles. The most awesome thing from an external viewer perspective was that their live stream production was just fantastic. They've listened to feedback from the community because they've obviously worked really hard on improving this quality. The spaceplane's wings swept back for re-entry and it descended gracefully back into the atmosphere. Before we knew it, they were touching back down at Spaceport America. Now, just a few weeks ago, you might remember SpaceX's Transporter 8 mission from June 12. Well, we've had another sad hiccup for Launcher Space, which is disappointing for them. On board SpaceX's rideshare mission, they had this payload tug named Orbiter SN3. This tug was carrying 6 small satellites on board of its own, but unfortunately, soon after separating from Falcon 9's second stage, the orbiter lost control. It has been reported this week that there was a problem with its attitude control system. Apparently, a software issue induced a spin, making it impossible to properly align its solar panels and generate the needed electricity. With its batteries quickly draining, Launcher Space made the decision to quickly deploy all of the small satellites to avoid the risk of losing them. This all comes after their previous mission, Orbiter SN1, had issues of its own. That was launched on the Transporter 6 mission and was carrying its 8 different smallsats. In that case, due to an anomaly with the GPS system, it failed to deploy any of the 8 smallsats that it was supposed to. So luckily in this latest mission they did successfully deploy them, but unfortunately one of the main payloads was Starfish Space's Otter Pup, which had an interesting mission. The aim of this satellite was to demonstrate on-orbit docking technology. It was to be deployed and then would re-dock with the orbiter SN3. Given that it is now in a spin, that is no longer really possible, so there isn't much purpose left for Otter Pup. We also have some new updates from United Launch Alliance about their new Vulcan vehicle preparing for flight. They had a busy week prior, of course, successfully launching the second last Delta IV Heavy. I just can't help but drop this new footage in here from Tory Bruno this week, a sweet viewing location from the launch tower there. This week we thought United Launch Alliance would be back into Vulcan preparation for launch in about a month or two. Well, not so anymore. During the week it was announced that more work is needed on the Vulcan Centaur upper stage. You might recall a few months ago a Centaur upper stage test article exploded during tests due to a hydrogen leak. Due to that event, it's been confirmed that the Centaur's thin-walled tanks need more reinforcement. Yep, that means that ULA are going to have to destack the upper stage from the Vulcan, which had just a few weeks ago performed a successful flight readiness firing, and then the second stage is going to need to be sent to a factory in Alabama for these modifications. Sadly, this all means that the very first flight of Vulcan has been pushed back for quite some time. ULA has already confirmed that the launch is now set to happen sometime in the fourth quarter of this year if everything goes smoothly. It must be the week for frustrating news. While Perseverance and Ingenuity are exploring Mars and collecting new and exciting data every day, the sequel to this mission was, of course, this, a sample return mission to return the Martian surface samples collected by Perseverance back to Earth. Well, it turns out that this mission is facing the ultimate threat. More on that shortly, but first, a big thanks to AG1 sponsoring this video. Maintaining a well-rounded diet in a busy work week can be tough. This, however, is an effortless solution that is so easy to introduce. AG1 is specifically designed to seamlessly integrate into your daily routine and boost your immune system. Given the extensive processing that most of our food undergoes, it can be quite the task to ensure that we're getting all the essential nutrients that our bodies require. As an individual who spends significant time indoors creating content and admittedly doesn't always prioritise the best diet, I've relied on specific supplements for quite some time. This single drink, though, contains a comprehensive blend of minerals, nutrients and vitamins that actively support overall health and aids in digestion. The results have been quite clear for me. I feel sharper and more focused than usual. The best part is just how simple it is to prepare. Just mix 1 scoop with water or juice and you're good to go. For those who frequently find themselves on the go, you can even have these travel packs instead. Unlike the larger refrigerated pack, you can just effortlessly toss these into your suitcase and just tear one open each day. Add AG1 to your morning routine. Just visit drinkag1.com/MarcusHouse and as a bonus offer, you will pick up a 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D3, K2 and 5 travel packs for free. Thank you, AG1. So yes, the Mars sample return mission is facing a big problem, the budget. Apparently, over time, the amount estimated for this Mars sample return mission has risen from $4.4 billion to somewhere around $8 to $9 billion. Yeah. Ouch. If you include increases in launch and operation costs, that could very well soon pass the $10 billion mark, making many wonder if it's actually worth the effort. This mission is currently taking a massive share in the pie of the planetary science budget, which is $3 billion per year. This Mars sample return mission is getting about 1/3 of that. It is all quite the amazing technical challenge, of course. The lander here would be the most massive that NASA has ever built for Mars and would fit into a typical 2-car garage, weighing in at around 3.3 metric tons. Assuming that NASA continues with this mission, right now, the most optimistic answer for when this would launch would be sometime after 2030. The thing is, NASA plans to have crews on the surface several years later, which could also return samples to Earth. So, is it worth it? What do you think? Speaking of humans on Mars, just a few days ago, 4 incredible volunteers stepped foot into NASA's mind-blowing Mars habitat located at the epic Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. We have Kelly Haston, the commander, Ross Brockwell as flight engineer, Nathan Jones being the medical officer, and the science officer, Anka Salerio. These patient explorers are embarking on a mind-boggling 378-day mission, willingly cooped up inside this Mars Hab mock-up, and that to me is nothing short of extraordinary commitment. This mission, known as CHAPEA, or the Crew Health and Performance Exploration Analogue, is the first of its kind and all part of a grand plan to simulate the challenges that our future Martian astronauts will face. They are going to tackle everything they can here, from the resource limitations, day-night cycle modifications, and equipment failures. They will have simulated communication delays and even other environmental stresses applied during this endeavour. It's going to be as close to living on Mars as we can get without actually leaving the Earth. It's all taking place in Mars Dune Alpha, a state-of-the-art 3D printed habitat structure which is designed for separate areas for living and working. It's an authentic Martian experience, as they say. 3D printing may indeed be the key to construct future space settlements on the Moon and Mars without the need for multiple costly launches carrying much of the building materials. So, best of luck to everybody on this simulated mission. Huge thanks for making it all the way through to the end of this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like and hit subscribe so that we get to keep making them. If you would like to help more directly, like all these many fantastic people, all this support makes a big difference to us. It really does. Just a reminder, we've only got this merch available for a few more weeks, so if you want to pick that up, go right ahead from the links below. And yes, if we have given you a thirst for more space goodness, the algorithm thinks that you will enjoy this video here next, or maybe these videos. Thanks for watching all this way through, and I'll see you all in the next video.